Hey listeners, before we get too far into the episode, I would like to throw out there that we have 2 events coming up with Parable Arrows. These are going to be live events that are hosted for free in the Wisconsin area. So if you are in town, we would love to see you there. Your first date is April 13th. That will be taking place at Eastbrook Church in Milwaukee. Again, this is a free event, so you can just show up and hang out and have fun. The time will be from 10 to 12. It will feature a presentation and then something very similar to what Femi and I do when we do our podcast, where we are going to break down some clips, talk through some ideas, and just be together in community. The next date is May 18th. That will be taking place at High Point Church in Madison. That is also going to be a free event, and I believe the time is also 10 to 12. Is that correct? Femi is recording with me at this moment. Okay, also 10 to 12. So 10 to 12 both days, just different locations. So April 13th at Eastbrook Church in Milwaukee, May 18th, High Point Church in Madison. Again, these are free events. We have a form in the description of this episode that has some questions about our podcast, our organization, and what you would like to see from us in the future. If that is something that you would like to fill out to help us understand, what you would like to see from us, please do so. That would be a huge blessing to us just to see what you would like, how we can grow, things we can be doing better. Also, if you could leave a review on your platform of choice, that would help us grow a ton. So with that, we'll play Femi's catchy intro and get into the episode.
Welcome to the Parable Arrows podcast, where we wrestle with story to seek deeper truth. We believe that engaging with the art of the world can help us discern more of what God, as the true artist, is trying to reveal in the beauty of his story. Join us as we discuss movies, ideas, and practice engaging with art, God's word, our thoughts, and each other.
Hey Archers, this is the official episode 35, Turning Red. This is March's episode. I'm one of your hosts. I'm running this shindig this time. This is Josh. I'm joined by the magnificent Femi Shikoya. Femi, how are you?
I'm doing well, blessed, highly favored, better than I deserve, and all the other things that Christians say.
All the other things that Christians say to me too. Today, our subject or our film is Turning Red. It is a film starring the voices of Rosalie Xiang, Sandra Oh, and Orion Lee. So the reason we selected Turning Red is for Women's History Month. As sons of mothers, one of us the father of a daughter, husbands of wives, and friends of many talented women, we want to celebrate you. Also, as 2 dudes running an episode about a female-focused movie. Our discussion in this episode will focus more on aspects like identity, growing up in general, and parenthood. So there will definitely be some overlap talking about the themes that are more female-centric. Of course, we're not going to sit here and talk about what it's like to be a lady.
To be a mother or a daughter.
Yeah, because we don't know. We won't cover everything, but we hope our discussion will encourage you to spend time in community, to think through stories and engage with other people. For any new listeners, we have this kitschy breakdown we called SMART. It's an acronym. The S stands for summary, the M message, audience for A, R rethink, and then the very end we add in some theology to kind of wrap it all up and to ground our discussion in the scriptures. So to start, here's our summary of Turning Red. So here's our summary courtesy of IMDb. So in 2022. Whoa. Not when this movie takes place.
No.
In 2002, Mei-Ling Mei Lee is a 13-year-old Chinese-Canadian girl living in Toronto. She helps take care of the family's temple dedicated to their ancestor Sun Yi and works to make her strict, overprotective mother Ming proud. Mei has a vivid nightmare one night involving red pandas. When she wakes up in the morning, Mei has transformed into a large red panda. She hides from her parents and discovers that she only transforms when she is in a state of high emotion. Ming initially believes Mei is experiencing her first period, but finds out the truth when she further embarrasses Mei at school, causing Mei to transform and run home. Later, Mei's friends discover her transformation, but taking a liking to it, Mei finds that concentrating on her friendships helps her to control this red panda within, calm her down, and help her acclimate back to regular life. So Ming, having seen this, allows May to resume her normal life, but refuses to let May attend her favorite band and her friend's favorite band, For Town, which is coming to Toronto very soon. Instead of listening to her mother, May and the girls secretly raise money for tickets to go to the concert at school, exploiting the popularity of May's red panda form while lying to Ming. To cover the last ticket, May agrees to attend an annoying classmate's birthday as the red panda. At the party, May is upset to discover that the concert will be held on her ritual night, the night that is supposed to exorcise this red panda so that she can just be a normal 13-year-old girl. In the midst of her rage, at this birthday party, she attacks a classmate who insults her family, frightening the other children. Ming shows up, discovers May's activities, and accuses her friends of corrupting and taking advantage of her to make money for the show. Ashamed and afraid to stand up to her mother, May fails to come to her friend's defense. Things between the family get even worse as May makes a choice. She is keeping her red panda. Ming and May have it out, causing Ming to crack her protective charm that holds back her panda form. As May runs to the concert with her friends, Ming transforms and makes her way to the stadium as a giant, emphasis, giant red panda. Action ensues, and May and Ming end up in the ritual circle realm together. This is the realm where they're supposed to get the pandas out of themselves so they can just separate and be individuals. May meets teen Ming, so her mom's teenage kind of version, and they share a brief moment of reconciliation. Ming and her mom, May's grandma, also share a brief moment of reconciliation. Things are set right, and we end the movie with May in her panda form gladly working at her family shrine with her mom. All right, now we're going to move into our message. So I'm going to pass the mic over to you first, Femi. What did you think was one of potentially the many messages that this movie had to offer?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And for listeners, remember that we're not saying these are the messages you should take away. These are the messages that we took away after thinking about the movie for a while. But the first one I thought of is the pressure that family puts on us is too heavy. I think the very first line of the movie is something along the lines of one of the 10 Commandments. The number one rule in my family is honor your parents. Mm-hmm. And that idea of that pressure is something that just can weigh us down, and they need to let us walk our own path. They don't know what we like. Things have changed. A second message is a little bit lesser, is because her friends are so crucial to her control and emotional stability that the family we choose is our real home base. So that's two things that I took from the movie. What are some things that you took as far as the message is concerned, Josh, of a message from the movie?
So we had kind of a weird day on Friday with our students because we had a bunch of snow. We're in the Midwest, and, Wisconsin, being very Wisconsin, hit us with, 5 inches of snow out of nowhere. So I only had 2 students in my room. And so 2 of my students and I actually watched this movie, and I asked them at the, towards the end of it, okay, what do you think is a message? And they were both 2 of my female students, and one of them said, well, it's about being true to yourself and, putting and making sure that you are who you are. And I was like, yeah, I would agree that that's a message. And as I kept watching, and this being the second time I've seen this movie, I kind of took a deeper, kind of more like, ooh, I actually don't know how I feel about what this movie is saying. And so for me, I said that at the end of the day, if who you are clashes with your family, your personal life desires supersede those of your guardians. So I worded that strongly, purposely, to hopefully, kind of clarify what I'm thinking during our rethink section. But I guess a simpler version of saying that if I want to be who I want to be and I want to do what I want to do, and my parents don't understand, and there's reason for me to dismiss what they're telling me to do, I have every right to dismiss what they're telling me to do because they're not fair, they don't get it, stuff like that. So with that, we've got a couple of things that we're talking about here. So this will be interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think? And I see a couple keywords that you added into yours, like with nuance and stuff like that. I kind of had a similar feeling from my perspective. So how did you feel? Did you agree with some of these messages or disagree?
Yeah, so I did not agree with the main message that I think the movie was promoting. I do think the movie had something to say around they're not being a bad guy. We've talked about this with Disney before and what they're trying to do and not have people just be labeled as good and bad, but this familial strife be so centered on how their characters interact. But the nuance is that time and the progression of time can change family cultures and traditions. That's a given, right? It's going to be easier or harder to get access to some traditional foods or wear or music or, whatever you might have in a family tradition if you're across the country or in a new country or you have a city that is now really easy to get stuff. Like it doesn't feel as it's so hard or celebratory, things like that. But the assumption that holding on to tradition is old school and those things are ancient. Like there was a highlight of the food and her dad making the food, but this old school vibe, each generation, there's this old school, new school's clash. And that's something that's too old school or to be accepted. I don't really agree. The second one around the family being the family you choose, I think that's a very modern thing because we have families disparate so far over the world. So I think a lot of people like myself, I feel that. I was born and raised in Tennessee, but my parents are from Nigeria. I have family that is in Chicago, family that's in New York, family that's in California and Texas. And so we're so spread out that we do have to sort of pick our family. And but that family of faith and biology, for me, I still didn't really choose. And we have to work through stuff. So we can fake it and just get along. And it doesn't mean that you can't build really close connections with people who aren't your family that you choose as friends. But I think that it's important to build the relationships around those core things. And if you don't do that, it doesn't matter what type of family you build. If they're only your friends because you go out drinking or you only have fun together, it's harder as life goes on to make sure they're going to be there when, you really need them in the hospital or something like that. So, but I disagreed with the way it was presented. Maybe some more nuance there. What about you?
Yeah, I also kind of it was hard. I originally had written down yes and no. Like I agree and I disagree. But to kind of take a more clear stance, I think no, because even as you're sharing, there's more and more about the movie that I think is really good. And I think there are some fun things that are presented that I think are good for parents to remember. You went through an awkward phase too. We all have, I think there's some of that stuff that is really needed.
Are you out of your awkward phase? Because I'm still living.
I didn't think it ended. Yeah. I thought everybody's still in it. So from that front, I think there's a lot that this movie kind of invites us to engage with and to talk about, which I think is great. I think, though, that there's a really dangerous line that this movie walks between also kind of suggesting, and that's one of the closing questions is oh, but they don't get me. And because they don't get me, I'm going to go find people who do get me. And I'm just going to be all in on what they say and what they do. And because they get me, they get a pass, or they're going to be the people that I seek reconciliation with versus well, my parents don't really get me, so I'm not going to seek reconciliation with them because what's the point? They don't understand me anyway. So let me at least kind of reconcile with the people that, have proven that they're going to be with me no matter what. So the way I do kind of agree with this, and you said one of May's opening lines is, honoring your parents. And I do think, and I have it listed in our theology section, that Jesus is clear, though, that according to him, there will be a point, and he came to cause a point at which people would have to choose between their family and him. And so I don't think it's wrong to say that family tension shouldn't happen, or that there shouldn't be a point where sons and daughters will have to stand up to their parents. I think of in a more serious tone, like abusive situations, or in situations where there's unhealth and clearly destructive habits that are being done by parents and promoted by parents. But I think in the general sense that this movie is taking place, that's not the scenario. it's very much just like, I'm just a teen, you're an old parent, and I'm just going to do what I want to do. So I think there's a tension and like some nuance that we'll dive into a little bit more as we go. But yeah, so I don't think I do agree with this movie. But with that,
I agree with you that it was fun though. It was fun.
It was fun. It's a fun movie. But let's go to our audience and our rethink. So with this, and both you and I, Femi, kind of talking like this is a Disney Pixar movie, so it's aimed at kids. You know, the fluffy panda. It's about like 13-year-olds and, you know, mother-daughter dynamics and stuff like that. Of our three usual categories, families with kids, friends, and evangelistically to spark conversation, where do you land on those categories?
Yeah, I think that the one that I felt like, where would I watch this? It's that end of high school age range. Because a lot of people are exiting puberty slowly, and they have some of these dynamics that they just sort of went through. They can talk about it, think about it a little bit differently than if you're 7, 10, 12, and either in the very midst of it and not really understanding what's going on and take that away. Or if you're even younger and all you think is fluffy panda, which is, you know, good for marketing. The reason for kids I would hesitate is there's a lot of lying, there's a lot of disobedience, and it never really gets resolved. There's not like a clear punishment around the fact that there is disobedience. And I can understand from the main character's perspective, I feel unheard. And why do I need to apologize if I wasn't the one being listened to? But it still doesn't make up for that. And so that can be something that you need to talk the line with. With friends, it really astoundingly, it has helped me talk with friends in a healthy way about our relationships with our moms. And not really our moms specifically, but ourselves and what we have done to contribute to how we interpret their behavior when we know a lot of them are similarly just trying to care for us. So that's been really cool. Yeah. Evangelistically, I feel that it means a little bit more between mothers and daughters. So I personally wouldn't say I'm going to take Turning Red as a stepping stone conversation movie, right? But hopefully with my daughter or a high school or middle school girl at church or something who's asking me or my wife a question, or another young lady, like that could potentially be a reference point. But that's what I sort of thought of in our three typical categories. What about you?
Yeah, 100% agree. I think with families with young kids, I would caution this movie if you are unwilling to address some of the choices and decisions that are made and some of the things that play out, or at least to, and I actually just had a conversation with one of our guest panelists who's going to be at our event in April at Eastbrook, Nick. He was saying how sometimes we over anticipate what a kid is going to pull out of some things. And so I think, you know, it's not to like make everyone freaky, like you can't watch Turning Red because it's going to make your kids like, you know, steal your car and go, you know, whatever. But I do think that there are some moments that it's like, woo, that was never really talked about, or like this kind of leans a little bit one-sided in how this kind of played out. And so I think my recommendation is like, yes, I think families with kids should watch this, but I would recommend an age range, maybe like 4th or 5th grade and up, just because I think there's some things going on that even from a biological and metaphorical standpoint of like the whole red panda and how Ming interprets May's situation, that I think is going to be lost or cause like more confusion or just lead to unnecessary awkwardness between families. But yeah, friends, evangelistically, I think especially evangelistically too, you know, this is a movie about Chinese culture, and there's a lot of interesting moments. And, you know, like I said at the top of the episode, there are a lot of different angles to attack this movie and to think through like, oh, how do I feel as a parent? How do I feel as a friend? How do I feel as a daughter? How do I feel as a son? How do I feel as, you know, a family member who's like watching other family members do things how I don't agree with them necessarily? Like there's a lot of places to step in and to feel and to resonate with things that are going on. But I think it's all under the statement too that, there's some stuff to talk about, which is the whole point that we're doing this thing. So any other thoughts on that? Otherwise, we'll jump into our first question of the rethink.
No, I think we get into it in the rethink, man. Let's go.
All right, let's do it. So my first question for us is, one of May's opening lines of the movie is, honoring your parents sounds great, but if you take it too far, well, you might forget to honor yourself. Personally, I heard this line this time around and I thought, yeah, but... So for you, Femi, where is there some truth in this statement and where are there some potential dangers?
Yeah, so some basic truths about honoring your parents is it's hard to determine what it means to honor. And I think honor and glory are two separate, sometimes overly Christian words, or words that are used in Christendom in ways that are confusing. Honor, to bring honor to someone, to make sure they have no shame associated with you, is different from making sure that they are happy or making sure that they are comfortable, or making sure that people understand the essence of who they are through your action. And I think that to think about honoring your parents is typically, even if your parents are not great, a good thing. Where it goes too far is when you misinterpret honor into bring the happiness, glory, honor, comfort, or other types of satisfaction to them. Like you are an agent of your parent, and versus your own agent. That's where it can get dangerous, especially if your parents are pushing you to do things that are unethical. Yeah, sweep the leg, Johnny. That's not what you need to hear from your parents. Oh, just cheat on the test. You got to play in the game. Cheat on the test. You've worked so hard academically. It was one bad day of studying. Just cheat on the SAT. Get into Harvard. Blah, 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 blah. Whatever that thing may be. That's where honoring your parents, where you believe that you are the agent of their shame. You are the agent of how their reputation is received. That becomes dangerous. And then might forget to honor yourself. You don't really need to bring honor to yourself in our worldview. We work and serve others to glorify God. And so I don't necessarily need, and man, I want it sometimes. I want it so bad. I want the pats on the back.
Amen.
Right. But I need people to see my God as beautiful and me as competent. Right? I am a competent person. I can do work that I choose to do and do it reasonably well. But I don't need to honor myself. I need to respect myself so that I'm not stepped on. But my parents typically aren't going to step on me unless they're now stepping on me as saying I'm an agent of their reputation or their shame. So that's where that line can get really gray. And putting those two things back to back is really hard to piece through when you just sort of throw it at the end of the movie. Or is it the end of the beginning? I can't remember.
It's one of the last lines at the very beginning of the movie. So this is the first 2 minutes of Turning Red.
So it becomes that really, they just threw that in there and people might have heard it and absorbed it without really thinking about it. But what were some of your thoughts about the truth and danger in this statement?
Yeah, I think, and there's lots of stories that I could talk about with, being in college and wanting to get tattoos and having a secret tattoo fund that I had that my dad didn't know about. And he told me not to get any more until I graduated. And I was like, that's dumb. And, there was some disobedience there in hindsight, even though, so that's one of the levels where I kind of resonate with what May is trying to communicate here is I felt like I'm not doing anything horrible. I'm not doing anything super crazy unethical. I'm not hiding drugs from you or something. I just want to get another tattoo. What's the big deal? But in honoring myself in that moment, which is what I would say I was doing, I caused a lot of strife between my dad and I. Now, was all of it justified? And do I think he necessarily was seeing my decision accurately or the weight of that decision accurately? Absolutely not. But I decidedly chose to go against what he was asking me not to do. And I did it pretty unashamedly. So
Mm.
I think there's, especially just in our current climate in the world, there is this very tense idea that like parents or authority figures are just out to get you. Because there have been stories that are true of parents that have been out to get their kids and authority figures who have been out to get those people underneath them. And, whatever that looks like, whether it's, crazy abuse or just being a bad leader and, not using their leadership well. But I think to then, like in that statement of May at the beginning, honoring your parents sounds great, but if it's taken too far, it's like, do you actually know what taking that statement is like too far is? And I think in the movie she does to an extent, but then she uses what is maybe some unfair things that her mom expects of her to justify then the disobedience. So I don't know. That's a really tough statement, like you said, to kick off a film, but it really is kind of like the anchor of the entire story and like what it means is it's really about like, when do I and do I not honor my parents? And I would argue for the most of it, nothing that Ming or Jin expect as May's parents is unethical. Unfair, yes, but what's the difference between unethical and unfair? And maybe that's actually a follow-up question. We'll kind of piece it in as like 1B. So what would you say to that, Femi? Like,
yeah,
in that dynamic between parents and kids, what's the difference between a parent being unfair and unethical, and how might someone who's younger parse those two apart in a healthy way?
Yeah, and again, for listeners, this is not something we've written a treatise on, and there's more that you can look at. These are things that we're talking about after watching a movie, which you can do, and we hope that you do. The first thing I think of when I think of unfair is that unfair sometimes is okay. If you and I were in the gym together, and I said, hey, Josh, let's you and me both deadlift 450 pounds, right? It's an equal weight. Let's just both do the same weight. That's fair. No, it's not, because I have lifted that weight many, 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 many times before. You have probably not. You have not necessarily been
no,
in
I have not.
Where you're doing it. Like, that's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that we do is we say, okay, well, let's cater it to our ability. So it is trying to say that fair and equal are the same thing, and they're not. Parents have more weight in a household because they have more responsibility in a household. Kids don't have the same responsibility. So a lot of things that parents are asking kids to do, listen to me, even if I don't listen to you, that's not really fair, right? The thing is that I hope to say the ethical part of that is I don't only do that. The ethical part of that would be that I also listen to you. Mm-hmm. It's unethical to demand to always be listened to and then never take time for the people who are under the care where they are supposed to listen to you, listen to them and hear them. And it leads to what we see, I think, in cultural power struggles, whereas people are like, we need representation. We always need every single type of person to be represented in every sort of leadership. It means you don't think leaders are going to listen. It means you think the leaders aren't going to listen. Therefore, you need the representation, because a person hearing you isn't really going to hear you. So you need someone living like you to show up there. In that, if I try to take an equal representation, right, then I'm applying that to a population that's not necessarily all that same level of diversity or preference or whatever. And then that becomes unfair. Now I have a equally represented group, but now they're applying things to people in an unfair way because not all of that matters to everybody in the same way. So the unethical version of it is the cold, unlistening use of others. That's when parents are being unethical, right? Unfair is when at a time or a point in time, because they take more responsibility, have to make a decision. And they have to make a call. A teacher cannot take every single student and listen to all of them verbally for everything. They have to sometimes make a call to listen to one student or maybe two other students in a discussion and then switch to the next question. That's not fair for everybody who wants to speak or has an opinion. It's not fair for teachers to be friends with the kids who they agree with look like them when they were in school. It's not fair for teachers to like put more energy towards kids who are struggling than kids who are succeeding. A lot of things aren't fair, but it's not unethical. It's the best case that the person with the responsibility is trying to do. So I think that's the difference between the idea of parents being unfair and unethical is the students are in my way of my paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
My constituents are in the way of me getting to my next vacation. I'm not going to answer the phone when they call. Like, you're using people below you. That's unethical in the hierarchy system.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just using the people below me.
Yeah.
I don't care really about them as individuals and what their hopes and dreams are and how I can guide them through there and make a plan that incorporates their, success, their livelihood, their, for Christians, pursuit towards godliness. So
no, that's good.
That's off the top of the cup.
No,
So
dang, man, that was like a 450-pound deadlift for off the cuff answer. No, that's great. Yeah, I won't say too much on that, but just to give a closing thought in agreement. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what you're saying is being careful to not overinflate unfairness, because if we're truthful, there's a lot in the world that is unfair that we don't say jack crap about. But we don't really care because it's better for us. And so especially with teenagers and with adults and with anybody in any sphere, fairness almost basically doesn't exist. It should be maybe pursued and it's a good desire, but to try and mold everything around it can almost turn into its own worst enemy, which, we said is being unethical. So, man, we could probably spend the whole rest of the time talking about that, but we'll move on to our second rethink question. Ming and Jin have a freak out when they think that May's accident that she has very early in the movie is her first period. So how they respond is panic and overprotection. Specifically, Ming has an even more elevated response, stalking May at school and hiding behind trees in the school playground and stuff like that. So not just with young girls, but also with young boys too. How can adults get better at normalizing and guiding young people through the awkward parts of getting older? What are some of the consequences we may forget about by being overly freaky about very natural parts of our bodies developing?
Wow. It's interesting because of the premise of the question. I misinterpreted or just interpreted differently. I guess I don't know if I misinterpreted.
Go for it.
I thought that Ming was nervous because she thought May had turned into a panda, and they never really got to share, but she never seemed freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
But she was like, just in case it's just a period and not the panda, let me get these pads to her.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that we need to normalize awkwardness. I think the word normalizing gets used a lot, but if we're trying to be honest about life, there are some people, most of us, who are going to be awkward at some stage. Unfortunately, for a lot of us, it's that middle school stage where we're going from having less responsibility on us to the transition to high school, where you're starting to build the academic reputation of what's going to follow you, therefore, to college and beyond if you go to college. And so we sort of think of that middle school as the last time you can make a really big mistake. But everybody's trying to figure out who they are before they get lumped into whatever high school group they think they're going to get lumped into. And telling kids, you're going to be weird. And when people try to make fun of you, just let them know they're weird too. Don't take offense to being weird. It's the same as if people fart in public. Nobody wants to fart in public. Why would you then make fun of somebody for farting in public or draw extra attention to it? That's so rude. Don't do that. They didn't mean to do it. The same as if somebody has an accident or something. If you want to go and ask, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? That's the thing we should be guiding kids towards when they make a mistake. If for me, if I have toddlers and they're feeling sick and they throw up, I don't get embarrassed if they throw up in public. I don't get embarrassed if there's an accident. I'm just like, they're toddlers. And then I let them know, hey, we normally try to hide this. We normally try to get to the bathroom or to the toilet, or like, this is what we try to do to avoid it being so public, so people don't look at us or stare at us unnecessarily. But we should do that for middle schoolers. We should do that for high schoolers. We should do that for college students who are trying to figure things out. And let the awkward, be not proud, because we don't want to teach pride, but be honest
about the fact that we don't know. Be humble, and that can help. And the consequences of not doing that is we add on moralized language to things that don't need to be moral. If you are farting in public a lot, and it could be your diet or your health, then you need to go see a doctor. You don't need to be chastised, So what are we doing in the communication to make sure people realize the thing we care for is them and their honest communication and humility, and not how they're seen, and prioritizing how they're seen. The way they should be seen is honest. So that's one of the things I think is a consequence of us of worrying too much about it, versus teaching, hey, we normally don't do this here. So
yeah, and to add into that too, I love the idea of coaching kids at all ages, from lower school to middle school to college, to see someone going through one of those incidents and actually asking, how can I help? Are you okay? You cool? Like, can I get you anything? Like, do you need help to kind of like navigate this? I think that's a great thing to teach. I also think in a potential consequences, when we make very normal things, when we make them super taboo, I think it makes kids unwilling or even more afraid to ask or to talk to a trusted adult about those things. So if like I'm growing up and my body's doing weird stuff, but I heard my dad say something about this and I'm not supposed to talk about it, you're like, well, now that kid's stuck. And so they're going to talk to a friend, and that friend doesn't, then you get like a bunch of South Park characters running around in every middle school because they're all just feeding each other what they're absorbing or hearing and stuff like that. Go for it.
Another big consequence is hidden abuse of children, because adults and other children know they're going to be quiet. There are more and more celebrities all the time. We're recording this in March of 2024, and the celebrity that comes to mind is Drake Bell.
The documentary just came out.
Yeah. And all of the things that group of people who were so crucial to entertainment of so many people who are now in their late 20s and 30s, they just went through a bunch of stuff and didn't say anything because it's not appropriate to talk about it. Imagine walking into a school, not being nervous, but knowing that if a kid feels uncomfortable, they're just going to say like, hey, I know you're like the leader right now. Like, I feel extremely uncomfortable, and I'm probably going to talk about feeling uncomfortable. I don't know if you did anything bad right now. And the kid just tells you straight up. You're going to be less likely to mess with that kid as much as you're going to be less likely to mess with somebody, whether they're not they're actually a good fighter, if they have a bunch of muscles on them. You're not going to want to, try to fight Conor McGregor if you have no training. Why would you talk, like, if you know this kid is honest and speaks with adults clearly and articulately, you don't want to mess with them if you know, like, oh man, they're gonna say something if I am not careful about how I joke with them, or how I pat them on the back, or how I congratulate them. If I need to like hold myself to a high standard around this kid because this kid has honest communication power. So if we don't do that and we say keep all these things secret, then kids will keep things secret, and that's not good. For that, that's another consequence I thought of.
Yeah, definitely. So encouraging kids to not be afraid to ask questions, about those awkward things and to create spaces is great. So kind of a deeper, little bit of a pivot, but similar kind of vein for our third question. So John Larry, who joined us on our Black Panther episode, definitely go check that out. He has a saying that he says in a lot of our teacher meetings that I really like. So he says, if there are some undesirable actions that are kind of popping up, kids talking in class, being disruptive, whatever, he likes to say we need to be careful not to police normal adolescent behavior, which I really like. So May in the film chooses to do a lot of things that are not wildly inappropriate or destructive. Are they disobedient? 100%. But objectively, they're not the same thing as, like her starting a drug habit or something, thank God. But they do go directly against Ming and Jin's instructions. So for you, Femi, what do you think is the balance between letting teens be teens? They're going to have to figure some things out. They're going to make some mistakes. They're moving out of the awkward phase, but they're almost moving into just a bigger, more volatile, awkward phase in high school.
Yeah.
So how do we let them do that without using that phrase of like, teens are teens as a way to justify, whether it's delinquency, inappropriate behavior, disobedience, stuff like that.
Yeah, this is another great one for listeners for you to think about and talk about with people. We hope that you take these and talk about these with people. So my first reaction would be my parents had high expectations on our academic performance. And because of that, I felt like I needed to make sure that came first. And it worked out pretty well. The reason why it worked out for me is because if I was able to obey them, it showed that I was ready for more responsibility as I got older. If I could get my homework done to my teacher's liking without my parents ever seeing it, they knew, oh, he heard a command, he made a plan on when he was going to do the command, he did the command, I saw nothing about it, and he got a good result. I can trust him now with more and more and more responsibility. And that was really good for me. The difference between disobedience and like delinquent behavior and innocent behavior, I think fits into the vein of like whatever that parenting model might be. So if you're trying to say like, my kid can listen to music in my house that I might not like, that's normal adolescent behavior. Right? Like they can listen to music loud. They can listen to music very loud. They can't listen to music if I tell them, please turn your music down, because then that's checking like, hey, do you know how to obey? Like when to keep it in check? Do you understand where times for certain things are? My kids can make a mess, but when I say it's time to clean up, they need to clean up because they need to show me before I give them more responsibility what to do. So not policing their behavior all the time is to make sure that at the right time, I'm able to say, this is the test about whether I'm able to give you more or less responsibility or adult to adult access to me, right? Do you know how to be aware of these boundaries and timelines? And if we don't navigate those well, I think that can be harmful. Teaching everybody, hey, there might be environments where you don't want to navigate it like that. That's something you can also do with teenagers, young adults, kids. And that's maybe not the cleanest line, but it fits within that model. It's about where you're trying to grow the person. And when it's a direct disobedience, it's still disobedience. If it's delinquent, it's delinquent. Like if it's something that is actually harmful, or an egregious disobedience, then I'd still consider that delinquent. But a lot of things are not going to hurt your parenting model by your kid participating in.
Yeah.
Kid eating healthy and they have like 2 hot dogs. Like, give me a break. Like, that's not going to destroy all the other stuff you're doing. And it's going to expose them to the fact they might not like him. So, what about you? What are some things as far as maybe specifically the classroom that you're thinking about that have been those lines you draw?
Yeah. So great example is, wouldn't you know it, 10th graders who I teach love to talk a lot. And I have learned that it is unnecessary for me to yell or to scream or to be overly volatile in getting them to stop. That to me is an example of quote unquote policing normal adolescent behavior. Kids don't know when to stop talking. Like, I don't know. I've met very few kids when they're all in the same room who don't just feed off of each other. Like, you can even have kids who are normally really quiet and introverted, and if they're around the right people, they just go bonkers. It's weird. It must be some kind of, emotional science or something. But does that mean that I just let them keep talking over me if I'm trying to communicate something? Like, no. And so we've created a rhythm, kind of like you said with the parenting model, where I will just stand there and I will have a look on my face where like, I got stuff to say, but I'm just going to sit here until you're done. And they have grown over time to be fast enough to be like, oh crap, he's not talking. Okay, we need to just like sit here. And they'll tell each other like, hey, chill. So I think there's a difference between like, I know, and I think I've actually had to grow a lot as an educator to not take that behavior as personal to me. And I think that is a huge part of what was behind this question is I think for me, I've had to grow through, okay, just because this kid didn't turn in a homework assignment doesn't mean they hate my guts. Just because this kid is talking while I'm talking doesn't mean that they're trying to do it to like incite a riot in the classroom or whatever. They're just teenagers and they're figuring things out and they don't want to do things when they don't want to do them and they want to talk when they want to talk and they want to be by their friends and like that's just normal. And so the statement of that being normal for me is not a statement so then it continue like so then that behavior is allowed to continue. It's more a calming of like instead of it just getting higher and higher and higher and being like, why do they keep doing this? Blah, blah, blah. You know, and me like ramping up. It's like, this is what teenagers do. And when you say that to yourself, or like you said, this is what toddlers do. They have accidents in Costco. This is what old people do. They have wild opinions, you know, like joking or whatever. But like when that is our statement, it doesn't mean that what has happened is okay, but it means or hopefully helps us just like take a deep breath. Okay, now I can address what is happening in a way that isn't going to cause it to escalate or you know, be out of hand. So I think it's being careful to be like, okay, is my kid listening to a band that I don't really want them listening to? Well, that's where we can have one of our great media conversations about like, well, how do you feel about that? Is that affecting you or not? Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to let you choose this, but if I start noticing some things, here's what I'm going to ask of you. We cool on that? We agree? All right. You know, whatever. Versus, hey, shut that down. I don't like you liking that band. Bah, you know, like it's probably justified, but that might not yield the results of the relationship that I'm trying to form by, you know, quote unquote policing or micromanaging, however you want to frame it, their decisions or their kind of like growing process. So I think that kind of leads into our fourth one. So an area that I actually want to prod at the message and the messages that we were talking about at the beginning is that in the film, like you said, there really isn't a lot of accountability for many of May's choices that are pretty blatantly disobedient, like whether you think it's justified or not. They go against what someone asked her to do or not do. So she fails to tell her mom the truth about the panda merch. She tells her mom off and kind of yells at her, you know, I'm 13 and I want to do all this stuff before running off to the concert. And even in the kind of the concert flurry where they're flying around, May does the same thing. She kind of tells her mom off and ends up literally knocking Ming out. So yes, May's friends were mad for a moment and Ming was also upset, but largely Maze gets away with quote unquote finding herself at the cost of other people, even though some of her methods, you know, were unjustified. So this is, and if you want to take this in a different direction to close this out on this question, Femi, that's totally cool. But my original thought was, what do you think this lack of consequence for May should signal to us about not just this film or this story, but like media and stories at large?
I think that if it's justified enough in the way the story's told, we let the characters get away with a lot. Aladdin lies a lot. And he gets his sort of fairy tale ending. Mm-hmm. Flynn Rider lies for most of the movie and like is in love with, I think Rapunzel's an underage girl in Tangled.
Yikes.
And gets away with, right? Like, like,
oh man, that's a whole nother thing, dude.
You know, like,
gosh.
And then there's May and there's Luca and his family and the kids. So I think it's just if we like the protagonist enough, we let them get away with stuff. I mean, think about every single heist movie. It's literally robbery, like the height of deception. And because they're doing it for a noble cause, we let it go a lot of the time. So I think we just need to challenge ourselves as people. Why is it okay for bad things to happen if we're okay with it? If we're okay with it, we let it slide. I think we need to be honest with, we get away with a lot of stuff we shouldn't really get away with. I know I have in my life, and I've regretted it and shared with people and had to come clean about things that I'd rather have stayed buried. But my conviction has just made me say, like, no, I need to say something about this. Something can be really damaging. And one that I know is really affecting a close friend of mine. And it's at the height of integrity for him to say something about it, but he could have let it slide, you know? And so we need to challenge ourselves on the fact that there needs to be a consequence for talking to your mom that way. There needs to be a consequence for being rude. To say that you need to be heard is completely different. To say that someone can, in their emotional pain of not feeling heard, have a space to say it, I 100% agree. If you don't feel heard, you should say it. But I think the way that we word it, and this is something I'm learning even earlier in my marriage, is saying, I feel this way because of this thing that happened. This is what I feel. It doesn't give me a right to accuse them and like, you did this and now I feel this way. It's you, because that puts the energy on someone else. And May does that. She puts the energy on other people. Aladdin sort of does that on the system. He's like, it's everybody else. Flynn Rider does that. It's the system. And it keeps them down. So that's why I do all the bad things that I do. I've done enough. It's justifiable. I'm a good enough person. And they all have hearts of gold. That's why we like them. But it doesn't mean there's no consequences. So I think it's challenge ourselves around those things. Make sure that we're really not just putting ourselves in those shoes going out. Like, it would be okay if I did that too. Two, remembering that the height of integrity is saying, like, there's still an order here that needs to be addressed. And that humility would be really, really good for kids to see, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even as you said with the consequences, I was really surprised too that we really don't like it. And I think in our modern context, it's very easy to kind of do a mother-daughter, father-son, parent versus kid, get away with the consequence thing. Like I remember that being one of the reasons that parents hated certain Nickelodeon shows growing up, is that the kids are disrespectful to their parents, and that's going to make all the other kids disrespectful and stuff like that. I think why those are valid to an extent, and with May, is the packaging of this story is very approachable. It's about a cute panda. It's very cartoony, references a lot of kid culture with anime. It's all about relatable things. Like you said, the majority of the movie, like there's nothing really egregious that gets said or promoted throughout the film, like there's nothing crazy, but it's those little moments where, wait a second, May just yelled at her mom, ran off to go to a concert that her mom told her not to go to, goes to her friends who, to their faces, she let take all the fall for her decisions, which I thought was wild, that they would not turn their backs on her and be like, listen, we get it. You've been finding yourself or whatever, but you straight to our faces just
betrayed us for your mom, who you don't even like, who you've told us the entire movie you don't even like. And so there's so many parts where it's like, whoa, it's not just the parent-kid dynamic, it was the friend dynamic too that almost shocked me more. Because I was like, the parent thing, that's played out. Like people have been doing that for forever. But I was like, wait a second, the friends don't even say anything? Or they do it for 30 seconds, and then it turns into like a joke that's like cutesy because she's taking care of your little pocket monster the whole time and she never let it die or whatever. It's like that's not accountability. And granted, again, context, they're all 13-year-old girls in 8th grade. Like nobody knows how to handle anything. But it was surprising that there was nothing. That there was basically nothing. I would say that the movie was more the totality of the consequence of the mom not telling Ming not telling May that this is their family history and what it really is. The entire movie sort of stemmed on the fact that I thought I had more time to tell you. Right? When her dad walks in and goes, it happened already? And then she looks up and is like, already? What do you mean? What do you mean? Like, you knew? You didn't tell me? And that's probably a lesson to every parent and trusted adult. You tell your kid as soon as you can start to have the conversation, little by little, start spoon feeding it, because if it becomes one day they find out that you knew all this time, it's really going to hurt them. It's really going to hurt. Unless you're super abusive like the Dursleys and I'm Harry Potter, you know, then I'm like, okay, peace. Like, I'll see y'all later. That's the type of betrayal when kids learn something their parents knew they were going to learn at some point, but decided, I don't really want to talk about it yet. You know? And so the movie seems like it's a consequence for Ming and Jen to be like, hey, you should have told your daughter this. This was going to happen. Y'all dealt with this. And we see in the movie, it was a big dealing with it. So May, I think, gets off on the fact that this is her mom's sort of absolution for her not telling her the truth. And her mom feeling guilty still for what she did to May's grandma in being a panda and scarring her eye, which it's never said explicitly, but that's why her grandma has a scar, you know? So I think that May, like, we, in the way the movie's packaged, like you said, we just miss on the consequences that May should have, like, hey, I need to do this to my friends to make up for it. I need to do this to my mom to make up for it. I still need to have a conversation with them about how upset I am that Abby got the dates wrong. And I still need to have a conversation with my mom about feeling like I'm doing all this work and not really getting anything for it. I need to have those conversations, but I also need to make up for the fact that it doesn't justify the fact that I was yelling and disrespectful, or, like you said, with the friends, just acting like a sorry was going to be that's all after they were there for me for so long. You know?
Yeah, which, man, dude, I remember seeing this movie the first time and being like, that didn't sit well with me. And then watching it again, you know, again, there's the fun moments, there's the things that you can relate with. But then you think, think too hard about it, and you're like, whoa, hold on. And it kind of falls apart a little bit. So that's a whole different, maybe we'll have that discussion at a later date.
Again, we can say all this, guys. You can continue to talk about this, or to all of our listeners, you can talk about the '90s boy band themes.
Oh, which is hilarious.
That was fun. You can talk about the anime stuff, the Four Town, like all the NSYNC
the emo haircut being the thing that every girl swooned over, which I definitely did or did not have at that age.
Canada, yeah, like there's all this fun stuff that's in the movie, and it's super clever. And the actors do a great job. We're not discounting the movie is a good movie for entertainment, right?
Yep.
And the music, I think Billie Eilish and Phineas did some of the music for it. So music is pretty good. Ludwig Göransson, who did Black Panther music. Like, there's a lot of people and a lot of talent into this joint. It's just that we, again, do deeper dives into it to seek more, because we wanted to see more. But it doesn't mean you should be like, avoid it like the plague.
100%. Yes. So. Yes, definitely. That's a great closeout with that. So we're going to head into our last section with those closing thoughts to theology. All right. So as Christians, and this being a Christian podcast, our goal is to not just give our thoughts and our interpretations and what we think is right or wrong. We want to make sure that we're grounding everything, that we're kind of putting the context of the story and the different things that happen in Scripture, which to us is our guiding truth to understand God and his plan for the world. So we have some Bible passages that we like to connect or encourage listeners to go check out that are kind of related to some of the themes of the movie. I have a couple, and Femi, it looks like you have a couple. So is it cool if I just read through mine quick and then you
go ahead.
Yours next? All right. So first I have Ephesians 6:1-4. So that is Ephesians reiterating to children that you should honor your father and mother. So again, from a biblical standard, if you are a teen, a middle schooler, a college age kid, and you consider yourself a follower of Jesus, you are to honor your parents. What does that mean? That's a bigger discussion. That's, Go back 20 minutes earlier in the episode. Femi talked about that. Second verses, these are kind of like a cluster all in Proverbs that kind of have a similar thing. So Proverbs 1:8, Proverbs 19:26, and Proverbs 30:17. So all of these verses are about children reaping the positive benefit or negative benefit or negative consequences of not following or by dishonoring their parents. So there's some pretty strong visuals in there, especially in Proverbs 30:17. It's about like, kids getting their eyes pecked out by ravens if they disobey their parents. So it's pretty severe. So with that, again, we talked about the nuances already earlier about what it means to listen to your parents and when there are times to not listen to your parents, but it's not as many as you probably want to justify. So I'm just throwing that out there. So Colossians 3:20 through 21, that's our next verse. So children, obey your parents in everything is kind of a summary of that. Again, a lot of these will probably feel like, oh, it's all on the parent side. Why don't the parents get any flack? They have their own bag of issues that they have to deal with in a lot of other parts of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of stories there. But again, as we kind of closed out in that last question, the Bible does desire us to be in unity and to be in right relationship, especially in family. So that's important for us to seek. And then...
Can I add one to those three?
Yeah, go for it.
Group? One is, and this is something that I've realized more as somebody who believed that if I was just a good student, it was going to help me all in my career. If you learn how to honor your parents, whatever you do next in work, you will look at the people above you as people you need to be able to create honor for. And the better you can do that, the easier your career is going to be. If you can make your bosses look good. It doesn't mean that you always are like subservient to them, but you can make the people managing you look really good. And to tie those three in together, I think of Joseph and how he rose in Potiphar's house, in jail, and to second in command to Pharaoh. Like, that's knowing how to make your leader look good, and children learning how to make their parents not necessarily like look spotless or be, again, the source, but to say, these are the things that my father and my mother do well and the things that they've given me. You can do the same thing to a boss. If these are the things that my boss does well, you can go, this is what they don't do too well, but this is what my boss has given me and how I'm working towards the goal of what we're trying to do to provide flourishing. So that's just those three things made me think of that.
Yeah. No, love that. And then Matthew 10:34 through 39. So that is Jesus saying that he came to divide, and he specifically starts talking about dividing families. So when we do talk about division in families, there is a fine line as Christians we need to be walking, where we're not saying rebellion in the classical, listening to angsty music and staying out past curfew rebellion. We're talking about a spiritual, when we talked about morality earlier, unethical things that are being asked of us. Who are we servants to? Are we servants to our parents and their desires, or are we servants to Jesus? And is the Spirit moving me to do something that goes against my parents' wishes? And in this case, Jesus is saying, you have my authority to go against them. If God's calling you to be a missionary, your parents don't want to do that because it's not a regular person job, that might mean you got to make some hard calls, and you have to choose who you're going to side with. If your parents don't want you to live in the house because you have your own job and you need to be a grown adult, and you're like, well, yeah, you should probably go find your own place. Just, I don't think there's anyone necessarily maybe in our audience dealing with that, but just throwing that out there. So last verse for me is Mark 16:1 through 12. So women were the first of the resurrection. So as I said at the top, this movie was mainly for Women's History Month and just kind of celebrating the ladies out there. And in the Gospels, the women that were closely tied to Jesus' ministry were the first to go to the tomb. And so there's a lot of cultural significance to that. There's a lot of use by scholars to say that was one of the reasons that Jesus' testimony and the testimony of his resurrection is so valid, is because of the fact that we have the story of these women going and seeing if he was really alive. And even some takes at the disciples that they weren't the ones to necessarily go. And so what that kind of insinuates as well. So Femi, you want to take us away with your last couple verses and then close us out?
Yeah, for sure. So the first one I had was Matthew 12:48 to 50. This is where Jesus is speaking and people try to interrupt him going, hey, your family's here. Your mother and your brothers and your sisters are outside. the assumption that I've heard a lot of theologians say is they're a little embarrassed that he's talking so externally about these things that should be probably more hushed tones, not in the face of spiritual leaders. Like, let's keep these opinions to ourselves. Let's, rein it in a little bit. And he says, no, the people who are really part of my family are the ones who do the will of my Father. And that's important to me, I think, just to remember family is important. What family is building is more important. And so what is your family building? And Jesus saying that is paramount. And then the 1 Timothy 4, 2-4, just beware of not standing on something solid. So the family tradition of this panda thing seems like it's going to keep going. You gotta have some tradition. Traditions aren't bad and don't need to be thrown out just because times change. So make sure you're having discernment about those lines of what you're fuzzy and what you're solid, because people are going to continue to try to move Christianity and move different traditions in areas and in ways that the thick lines, the solid lines aren't supposed to move. So just be aware of that. And then John 19, 26-27, even on the cross, being crucified, suffocating, Jesus wants to make sure his mother, his earthly mother, is taken care of. And says, mother, behold your son behold your mother. And John took Mary in and cared for her. And I think that's really, says it's not that your body, your physical body doesn't matter, your physical family, your biological family doesn't matter. It's that these people and what you're doing are really important. Work on the reconciliation when there's those disagreements, especially if you're somebody living under someone else in your household, in a child-parent hierarchy, or a child-guardian hierarchy. Work on what the reconciliation would be, not just the rebellion and the difference. That's all really important. So I think that's all that we got. Think we're ready for the closeout?
Yes, sir.
Everybody, we really hope you enjoyed this conversation. Again, these are not the only points. Take them away. But that's what we made time for today. So thanks for the support. Peace.
This episode was produced by Josh Erickson, Josh Cook, and Femi Shokoya, and edited by Josh Erickson. Our social media producer is Colton Mefford. We are currently self-supported. You can check out short stories, merch, and highlighted creators at parablearrows.com. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Parable Arrows, or support us on Patreon. Thank you for listening to the Parable Arrows podcast. Think, move in faithfulness, and trust God. Pull back, aim high, let it fly.